Hi, I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot, and I'm here with Catherine Austin Fitz. And we're at the Secret Space Program Conference, which is up in San Mateo, California, and it's really in the belly of the beast as far as Black projects and Secret Space Program go. So this is a great honor to be talking to you.
I've been watching your videos for years.
All right, well, thank you. So I guess it's Mutual Admiration Society, as they say. I want to say that, we just did get a clip with you with Steve Bassett, and that's going to kind of predate this on the interview, and it was great, some great authentic sort of
Stories.
Live conversational, anecdotal material. So what I want to do here is just back up a little bit. I want you to give your background just for the people that may view this and don't know about you, and this will be their first exposure. And then I want to drill down into some things that you've been releasing lately.
Okay.
We're kind of going to leapfrog over a lot of the sort of run-of-the-mill stuff and just jump around a bit because we're probably on limited time here, and I'm sure you're tired, and it's been going on all day, and you're kind of like...
It's great, though. It's very energizing.
Yeah? All right, cool. Well, you're kind of the center of attention at the moment at the conference, I think, and I'm sure there's a reason for that, because it's very interesting to be part of the sector, as I have for over 8 years, and what happens with people is that they come onto the scene, and especially if you have a background in sort of what we call the mainstream, and you are a renegade from the mainstream, and you've been pushed out of the game by all the things that have happened to you, and radicalized, as they might have said in the 60s. And so now you're at the point where you really have a view from both ends, and that's very valuable.
Yes, I've toured the overt and the covert economy.
There you go. There you go. And you have the open mind to be able to keep inquiring and keep staying open and keep pushing the envelope as well, and the courage to do so. So that combination is a killer combination. And we want to pursue all of that with you and see where you've been going and where you might be going next. So at this moment, first of all, just give yourself a brief introduction.
Okay. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I went to the University of Pennsylvania, studied Chinese, and then I went to Wall Street, and I went to business school, then went to Wall Street, had a very successful career. I was a member of the board and partner at Dillon Reed & Company, and left there. We sold the firm, and then I left and went into the first Bush administration as Assistant Secretary of Housing and ran smack dab into all the mortgage fraud, which is related to the black budget. And I left and started an investment bank. I left the Bush administration thinking, the fascists are going to take this technology and kill us all. So I started an investment bank called the Hamilton Securities Group in Washington. And my interest was in figuring out how we could use new technology to help communities basically be financially successful without government money and sort of get the government out of our hair and use technology to decentralize the financial system in a very healthy way. So, but once again, we ended up doing a project. We became lead financial advisor for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I ended up in a squabble with the federal government. We were making a software tool that would allow you to see all the government money in a community through GIS software. And the reality, Carrie, is the black budget finances one neighborhood at a time. So transparent cash flows in every county make it much harder to do the black projects. And so smack, again, we ran into the mortgage fraud. And I ended up litigating with the federal government for 11 years. Ultimately, we were successful. And I settled the litigation. And in the process, what I discovered, I started to do radio shows. And one of the reasons I got into this topic was I was on Coast to Coast. And I got to know so many wonderful people in their audience who convinced me, look, you've got to look at this even as a financial matter. So, but they all kept coming to me for advice about their money. How do I protect my money from this fraud? And so when I settled the litigation, I became an investment advisor. And then we published something called the Solari Report because we get so many questions that we just, every week we try and do a little piece on, and it's mostly how does this impact your health and money, and what do you do about it? So it's a lot about how do I deal with this and how do I make sure I'm successful no matter, all these things that are going on. So that's kind of my day job. Okay, so I've watched many of your videos, and it's always interesting for me because I know very little about the Secret Space Program. It's almost funny that I'm talking at the Secret Space Program conference because I know very little. What I understand is the history of financial fraud. And you're always making connections between, and I'll never forget watching your interview of Norman Berglund. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Bergrum, yeah.
Bergrum, yeah.
Excellent.
Fascinating interview. And he's describing the Voyager mission and when they started to get the photos back from the Voyager. And a chill went down my back because that's when the Iran-Contra financial fraud exploded. If you look at a lot of the fraud I was cleaning up at HUD, both as Assistant Secretary of Housing and then as the financial advisor, suddenly you had this fraud explode through the 80s, and it was like somebody blew a whistle and said, we need trillions of dollars, go get any money any way you can. And I watched his explanation of their fears, and I thought, oh, I bet there's a connection. But my favorite moment on Project Camelot, I just have to tell you, was Bob Dean was speaking, and he said, and it chill went down my spine, and I use this quote all the time, he said, we have to bring transparency to this because it is the destiny of the children in my family and the children I love to travel the stars. And I just said, woo, okay. and that quote has inspired me for many years. So you got that all on tape. Thank you.
That's a beautiful story. Yeah. Beautiful man as well.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so what I want to do here, and it's interesting you bring up Norm Bergrum, because I have to say that that's one of our most important interviews, in my opinion. And we have a lot of very important interviews, so that's saying something. But this man is, I forget his exact age, but he was, I think, over 85. I'm not sure exactly how old, when we interviewed him.
Right.
And he has since disappeared. Okay.
Really?
So what happened is that he was living in a house very close to here in Los Altos Hills.
Right.
And he was living by himself. His wife had passed. And it was just a serendipity that we managed to get in the door and get the interview. And I mean, the force was with us, so to speak. He had been being made an offer by a group that was going to take him. They were building him an underground, as he told us, an underground lab to start doing his, whole work again.
Right.
So he was very excited. He was still writing a book.
Right.
I mean, he was just this very active, very elderly man with his just very wide awake brain. And then what happened is that he said, "Oh, and I'm going to be doing lots of interviews in the public, and they're building me a lab, and it's all going to be fine." And I just thought to myself, "This is for whom the bell tolls." It's basically this man is going to disappear off the scene. They're bringing him back inside, and he had worked underground, not far from here at Moffett Field, on black projects, for years and years and years. And so here it is. He is gone. His phone was disconnected. He has been gone from, I can't reach him. He's absolutely off the scene since then. So you have to say to yourself, is like, what happens to these people? This is a black project scientist who was with them for years. He went out to pasture. I think they probably thought he was dead, but when I did the interview with him, the man was alive. He was.
One of the things I've believed for many years is the way I bless people is I connect with them, I become interested in their work, and then I call it Mr. Global. Mr. Global buys them away from me, and I say, "This is how I bless people."
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So you blessed him.
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, they were already on to him, even before I showed up. But still, and he had been it's on the video. He said he was nearly poisoned. You talked about being poisoned a number of times.
Yeah.
And I do want to go down that road, but first I want to ask you a couple key questions that have just, I really want to connect some dots here, and maybe these are crazy connections, but Promise Software, okay?
Very important.
Yeah.
What is not understood is how important the digital systems are to permitting massive fraud on a highly centralized basis. Right. The hardest thing for me when I was dealing with the litigation with the Department of Justice was sitting down and saying, how could, I've been told about how bad the mortgage fraud was, and I didn't believe it. So can I tell stories?
Yeah.
Okay, so one story, and I'll probably tell this tomorrow, was in 94 and 95. I had somebody working for me who had been as staff to a senior senator on the finance committee, and she came to me and said, there's a mortgage banker who's just really bugging the senator and really wants an appointment with you. Now, I was at Hamilton Securities, I was in private, and so finally I agreed I would meet with this guy. So this guy walks in and he's got these wire glasses and he's very serious, and he's got a huge stack of papers, and he says to me, I'm a mortgage banker, and the core competency of my family is we've been mortgage banking since the FHA was created in the 30s. And we keep a database of every FHA mortgage and related security. So we have, and he said, I brought you a copy of my database, and he pushes this massive thing of paper. I'm like, oh. And he says, I was part of a group of people in the Bush administration who got laws passed requiring audited financial statements. So a process had just begun where the agency started saying, we can't produce audited financial statements. So, but you would get these different reports. And he said, so we've gotten this financial statement from HUD that they've just published. And he said, there's something terribly wrong. And he said in the mortgage funds, at the time FHA had 4, it's now 2 mortgage insurance funds. He said, they say that they have $400 billion of outstanding mortgage insurance. He said, you don't understand, it's many multiples of that.
Wow.
Now, Carrie, I thought he was crazy. Because what he was saying was, the New York Fed, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Justice, and the Federal Board of Governors are all engaged, with the FHA in massive securities fraud. We're talking trillions of dollars of massive securities fraud. So I thought the guy was nuts. And I said, oh no, keep your database, that's okay, fine. So I was just like, get this nutcase out of my office. And it took me then when I ended up in the litigation, and I couldn't understand why it was so important that they steal our software. We couldn't get it back. This went on for years. I said, okay, I'm going to unpack what happened and all the different experiences I've had, both as a government official and then as an investment banker, dealing with this kind of fraud. And it took me years of sort of unpacking it and figuring out. I met lots of spooky people who've been doing the fraud who explained to me how it worked. And I finally put it together and I realized, that's true. All of these different agencies are engaged in massive fraud. Now, how could that happen and me not know? The way it is done, it is so much through the systems and centralized through the digital systems. And the creation of Promise Software was, to me, a very critical moment at which, the financial fraud could go into hyperbolic turbo drive warp speed, because you take Promise Software and those kinds of digital systems, and then you add derivatives and, sort of fancy financial engineering, and you're talking about being able to do trillions of dollars of stuff with millions of people helping to implement it when they have no idea what's going on because it's done through the digital systems.
Okay, so where did your software factor in to Promise Software?
Okay, so here's the interesting thing. All of this fraud can happen because the financial system within a place is disassociated from that place. So let me give you an example. You live in a congressional district. You live in a county. You live in a local area where you drive around and see everything. So for example, when I first became Assistant Secretary of Housing, I was the largest property manager in the world until the RTC got created. And then I'll never forget turning to Lamar Kelly, who was head of property disposition for the RTC, and I said, congratulations, you're now number 1, I'm number 2. And Lamar, this would happen to us and this would happen to Lamar. You would get a list of all your foreclosures in a place, and you would fly to that place and you would go out and there would be an empty lot. And your inventory says you have 10 homes there, but it's not, it's an empty lot. Okay, now, if you as a citizen get a financial statement for your place, because one of the biggest investments you make in your life is your taxes, the taxes you pay. There is no reason why you can't have a financial statement for your congressional district, for your Senate, your state, so that you can hold your congressman or your legislator responsible for the financial management of the government. Okay, so you could get, a financial statement for New York City. The reason you don't is because you are given financial disclosure, which is completely disassociated from the world you walk around and see and know every day. Okay? Because if you were getting it on a place-based basis, you would say, wait a minute, what do you mean there are 10 homes here and we just spent $250,000 per home to create these homes with taxpayer money? This lot is empty. Okay? So it undisassociates a lot of the systems that permit all of this kind of fraud.
Okay, so your software was doing this.
So when I was Assistant Secretary of Housing, I ordered place-based financial statements be made. And suddenly, boom, I'm out, and the project's canceled.
Really?
It all
That
stopped.
fast?
Yeah, that fast.
How fast?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look, but pretty fast.
Weeks?
Yeah, within weeks.
Weeks.
A whole bunch of stuff stopped. So I thought, well, fine, I'll just do it privately. We'll just collect up all, because most of the data that goes into the federal accounts is supposed to be public, okay? So we said, we'll collect up all the data and the database. It's a lot of hard work. It's boring. It's mundane. And now that we have GIS software tools, we'll create this wonderful, playful things, and we'll put it up on the web. We just, the web was just happening. We'll just put it up. And you can go and dial in and collect all the things and download and make these pretty maps and colors and see where all the money is. And part of the thing is we wanted to align the financial system with people in the environment, because you can make money healing the environment or make money making places safer, but you've got to re-engineer the government money. So we thought, if the small businesses can see this, well, all sorts of amazing things started to happen. So I'll give you an example. I had a partner, a very successful partner from Wall Street, who flew down in 1996, and we had big monitors. We'd won an award from the American Institute of Architects. We had all these monitors, very high tech, and very beautiful offices patterned after a Japanese tea house. So anyway, this guy comes down and he's yelling about how hopeless, the government's totally corrupt. And I said, he was originally Cuban, and I said, look, it's not hopeless at all. I said, where do you live? He said, I live in Bronxville. So we pulled up all the data on Bronxville, and I started to go through it. The first item was $4 million for flood insurance. And Luis goes nuts. He starts screaming in Spanish. I said, what's the matter? He says, Bronxville's on a hill. I've lived there for 30 years. There are no floods in Bronxville. So, because the insurance programs have a lot of the black budget fraud. So I don't know the flood insurance program. But anyway, the next morning I had a call with it. We downloaded and gave him a complete download of all the data on Bronxville, all the federal expenditures, the appropriations, the contracts, everything. The next morning I call Luis, and he stands me up for a conference call, which is unheard of. He's always on time. So finally I get through to him that afternoon. I said, Luis, we had a conference call. He said, I have been on the phone with the deputy mayor of Bronxville for 4 hours. I've gone through every item by item. He said, all this corruption is going to stop. I said, I thought you said it was hopeless. He said, that was before I had the numbers for my neighborhood.
Wow.
Okay. Now, there is not a neighborhood in this country where you cannot find, a contractor doing something for $25 to $150 per hour that someone in that neighborhood would love to do for $10 to $15 to $25 plus health care, and that job can be teleported in, okay? Or my favorite one is we, as financial advisor, we were due diligencing the foreclosure property, and I've got to tell you the Oklahoma City story that reminds me, but we were due diligencing the foreclosure property, and we would regularly find neighborhoods where you could buy and rehab a single-family foreclosed property in the FHA inventory when the public housing guys were spending $250,000 per unit in the same neighborhood to build or construct new public housing. So I went over to the public housing team. I took one of them out to dinner, and I said, look, we could build 4 or 5 homes for the price of one if we just reallocate the money by place, okay? Place-based optimization. And she looked at me and she said, but how would we generate fees for our friends? So I said, let's create 4 homes and just give your friends a check, it'll be cheaper. But that's because the opportunity is enormous. Now, I believe one of the reasons that you can't do that is because that disassociation has been what the black budget has driven a truck through.
Right.
Okay? and you had so much of this, I mean, during the bailouts, when you heard numbers, $27 trillion of bailouts, well, I think at that time, $8 trillion would have paid off all the mortgages in the country. So you're talking about the kind of mortgage fraud and securities fraud, both probably with respect to the mortgage-backed securities, Ginnie, Fannie, Freddie, and the Treasury securities. So you're talking about, securities fraud with derivatives of just mind-boggling amounts. So my theory is, one of the most interesting things that happened to me, I spent a lot of time trying to understand the relationship between mortgage fraud and narcotics trafficking by the intelligence agencies.
Yes.
And one of the things I discovered is whenever you get a group of soccer moms together in a neighborhood and they try and back the narcotics trafficking out, what they discover is, Tony Soprano is running the drugs. And if you back Tony out, the next thing you know, you've got James Bond and black helicopters coming down on your head. And the question was, why? And then you realize, oh, wait a minute, it's a highly centralized model, and literally the black budget guys can't have one neighborhood get out because then every neighborhood could get out. And one of the reasons that I'm so big on this idea that it's a material omission not to discuss these things, we need to re-engineer our economy. For years we've kept a false prosperity going in this country by being the big consumer in the global market. So China makes money by selling us stuff.
Yes.
And we buy that stuff, creating debt. We're buying stuff we can't afford. So if you look at the emerging markets, they need to increase their consumption and service economy. We need to reduce our consumption and increase our production. To do that, you have to re-engineer the government money by place, and you can't do that without, the reason Congress is running around looking ridiculous, because there are a lot of talented people in Congress, is they can't touch the black budget. Right. And I have a great article I really encourage everybody to read it. It's called Coming Clean Over the Fiscal Cliff. And it gets into why everybody is so stuck and can't talk about the real deal. And the black budget is the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Yes.
On re-engineering the economy. So we have to talk about this. And
Absolutely.
It's very uncomfortable for me because, I dive into subjects I know nothing about. One of the reasons I wanted to do the conference is a lot of the people speaking are the people I call to say, well, what should I think about? I don't know, and they're the people I look to help me understand this thing. But one of the things I know is we cannot rebalance and get our financial system healthy, let alone align it with the environment or people or living things without facing and dealing with this. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, absolutely. Well, I mean, because this is really an area that I've gone down the rabbit hole with.
Right.
But you're sort of on the surface, connecting all the dots on the surface.
Here's what I'm saying. As you go down the rabbit hole and look at all that stuff, what I'm saying is all of that is not only financially feasible, because that's how much money is disappearing.
Yes.
And we're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars disappearing. Right. And an entire global financial system organized to align with this rabbit hole.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's a drain. I mean, you're tracking the surface, but once it goes below the surface, you no longer know what happens. But you do know that it's draining. You know that you're following the tributaries. Right,
and that drain. If you look at our economy on a county level, that drain. It's not just draining the money. It's draining the spiritual life, the civic life, the intellectual life. It's turning, nobody can trust each other. It's a corruption, it's a corrosion of the body, of the whole society. It's turning us into a primitive society where the rate of entropy is going, higher and higher
well,
and higher.
I mean, I call it, a host to a parasite relationship.
Right.
I mean, that's what has happened.
I called it the tapeworm.
So the bottom line is that we, or this surface Earth, has become the host to a parasite that is now bigger, more successful, living, maybe as far as some of my whistleblowers say, 10,000 years in advance of where we are. In other words, we're serving them. Literally everything, all our sweat, everything we're doing is going down this drain into this rogue civilization. Right. And I know you know Rich Dolan, and he's talked about that.
But here's what I don't.
Key.
Here's what I don't know, because I've spent many years now traveling a lot globally and in the United States, and what I will tell you is I find no less corruption at the county level. I've been at a very high level in Washington and Wall
Yes.
Street, not to overestimate. I was a very low-level person in that world.
Okay.
And so, but what I will tell you is that they were as much a prisoner of the system in many ways as the people down here. Okay? And you can't explain what's happening. I can't explain what's happening by they're bad.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't.
Okay,
That's not
right.
my experience.
This is where I used to go crazy because people love to say, oh, it's their greed.
No.
It's not their
No,
greed.
it's not their greed.
It's not about that.
I'm
It's
in-
much beyond that.
Right. This is a very complex phenomenon.
Yes.
And it's a very deep system. So let's just look at the overt economy. The overt economy has been on a model, an investment model, which I call the central banking warfare model, for 500 years. Everybody, everything. Now, when you change a model, it's like a whole room dancing that has to change from a waltz to, the twist. That's, and try to get everybody to do it together without making a mess. That, so you're talking about something that's very old and very deep in just the overt economy. God knows what else is going on. So trying to change this is difficult, and the people who are, at or near the top, it's not an easy job, and I personally don't know what they're dealing with. That's part of why I keep looking into this subject. That's why I watch Project Camelot. I'm trying to figure out what is going on and why are these people behaving this way.
Well, exactly.
Right.
Okay, but that gets into like an agenda. And the fact is that they don't want to change the dance, at least in the direction you think they want to change the dance. So, but before we get into that, what I still want to stay back at the Promise software level, because I want to talk about how your software became an issue and how Promise kind of, would you say that it gets cobbled onto your software? Or that was the risk?
What Promise software was made by a company called Inslaw, and it was basically stolen by the government.
Right.
My understanding from Bill Hamilton, who was the president of
Right.
Inslaw and sort of the leader of the thing, what Promise software did was allow you to draw and conform data from lots of different databases. So before relational database technology really happened, it could create relational databases from legacy systems.
Yes.
And my understanding is what they did, when I first called Bill, because somebody said, okay, you've got to get to, Bill Hamilton and understand his part of the thing. I called Bill and he said, have you read Black Money by Michael Thomas? And I said, no. He said, read it, call me back. Because it's I don't know if you've read it. It's great beach reading that helps you, it gives you a real feel for how this stuff works.
Yeah, but I've gone
way beyond that.
Yeah.
Okay, but what you were doing was you were creating a digital system,
Yes.
which we now see finally come out with the Snowden revelations, where the U.S. intelligence community could basically move into everybody else's systems, including the bank settlement systems, any banks that were on the clearing and
Law
settlement
firms.
systems. Everybody.
You name it.
So,
we're talking police databases.
We're talking putting trapdoors. If you look at the software companies that became successful, they were putting trapdoors in that let everybody into. So the American intelligence community was going into financial institutions, and everybody else was sucking up data. And I think the power of it was, I have an article called The Data Beast, was that they aggregated it with artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And what they created was a machinery that allowed them to do extraordinary control file systems. So they took the control file system out of the confessional booth at the local church and moved it into the telecommunication system. That's number one. But the other thing they did was it allowed them to create the ultimate in both relational marketing and insider trading. It gave them a way of managing the economy, which is extraordinary, and many people don't understand.
Right.
So I used to see, I live in a very poor county, somebody loses their job, and within 24 hours, the drug dealer's at the door, and Chase is mailing them a credit card with a 30% interest rate. How did they know? It's quite, no, it's once you understand relational database marketing, most people look at the U.S. government. Now, when I was, and this will come out, I'll talk about this in the speech probably, when I was assistant secretary, and then when I was the lead financial advisor to HUD, at that time, a lot of the information systems and the payment systems, the lead contractor at HUD was Lockheed Martin. Okay, they got, I think when I was assistant secretary, $150 million a year just to run the core systems. I would try and get data, and to get data, I had to get it from a Lockheed system. I couldn't get it. I was the assistant secretary of housing. Lockheed Martin could deny me the basic data I needed as a legal matter to run my operation, you know, to fulfill my fiduciary obligation. Same thing happened when I was a financial advisor.
Really?
So when a lot of people look at the government, they see 21 covered agencies and a group of intelligence. I see 5 contractors with a giant database, and every one of those agencies is a collection cup. Because now when you go to the government officials are not in charge.
Right.
Okay? You have a government that doesn't have information sovereignty, and it doesn't have financial sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting. In the early 2000s, one of the top civil servants at HUD who retired, just top guy, really fabulous, talented guy. I was on the phone with him, and I explained to him that there was no one left at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, I believed, who had any understanding at that point of how the finances worked. The year before, $59 billion had gone missing at HUD. Okay, so you had reports of massive amounts of money just going missing, and he said, this can't be because, you know, in the old days, the budget guys would have stopped it or found it. And I said, there's nobody there. So he said, I don't believe you. So I made him a bet. A year later, he's driving down 40 and calls me and said, meet me at Red Lobster in Jackson. So I drive in and see him. He doesn't want to talk over the phone, and he says, you know, I've called every office, all my old connect. He said, there is no one, I cannot find anyone in the department who understands what's going on in the operations financially.
That's right.
And I said, because
it's not a person.
It's all being run by a small number. I mean, you've read Edwin Black's book on the Holocaust and how IBM built the database. Okay, Edwin Black wrote an absolutely fantastic book about how IBM built the database operations that the Nazis used to do the Holocaust. They could never have done the Holocaust without the
All right,
IBM.
yeah. So, okay, but I think it's gone a step farther, and that's a whole nother land.
Who's the lead
Artificial
contractor?
intelligence.
Right. Who's the lead contractor? Well, IBM provides software.
IG Farben, right?
IBM provides, I think, makes some of the software for the smart meters, but was given, my understanding was given the lead contract for the census.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at who's running the databases.
Yeah, the Nazis are back in power, right?
Put it this way, you know, what's going on is much scarier than what Snowden has revealed.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So,
but just one, you know, just to go back here, and that's beautiful, you know, you've covered it beautifully. But let me just tie this up one more time. Your software, because I'm curious, what happened with your software? Because I have a feeling, and I don't know if you would agree with me, that on some level you were targeted because of your software.
I think we were targeted for several reasons, but one was the software.
Yeah.
We were publishing, you'll see it in my presentation tomorrow, we were publishing maps that showed literally maps of where the defaulted HUD mortgages were and the foreclosures. Mm-hmm. And it was very contiguous. Like we published one map on the internet of South Central Los Angeles. And, you know, and what you could see is the mortgage fraud was directly related to what was happening with the Dark Alliance drug dealing. Yes. And the Gary Webb had just published his article, and that was all happening. I didn't realize it because I was being hit with subpoenas and all stuff, but we were publishing these pictures of the mortgage fraud, and I didn't know anything about the narcotics trafficking, so I would look at the map, and I didn't realize that these maps were telling things nobody wanted to told. And of course, that was during the whole debate about the CIA Memorandum of Understanding. I won't go down.
But what year was that?
96.
96.
96. A lot of the fiercest, they came in and seized, you know, they kept coming and trying to get control of our digital infrastructure. And it's a long, complicated story. It's all up on the internet. If you go to dunwalkie.com, I wrote an article and explained it all.
Yeah, I did some homework.
Okay,
here.
So, but they seized the offices, and I'm trying to remember the date they seized they kept coming in waves because you could tell they wanted something, and they weren't satisfied until they seized the offices. And while they were in the offices, they tried to falsify information. Luckily, we caught them. But then they put everything under a digital record. I had to take all of my records, nothing. I started off, I literally woke up the morning after, every piece of data, including my personal address book, was under court control, and we had to start from scratch. My Christmas card file, everything was in. And it took me 6 years to get those files out of the special master. Now, in the meantime, they put in charge, they hired as their contractor to help them manage them, the #1 contractor to the U.S. government on GIS software, CACI.
Right.
So when I finally got them, it took me 6.5 years and millions of dollars to get them back. And when I got them back, all the most valuable pieces were gone forever.
Yeah.
So,
but did they actually steal the software in the end? Or did you get it back?
The software was in many different pieces. Mm-hmm. So there were some pieces that were gone. There were some pieces I had. And it was funny, I approached the Free Foundation software, I approached the Internet Archive, I approached several places about, sort of taking everything, making it accessible so open source developers could see what they could do with it. They were scared to death. They wanted nothing to do with it. Yeah. And I think it's now that people are beginning to understand. First of all, it has taken many, many years for people to believe what I was saying about the extent of the mortgage fraud, because it was so extraordinary. One of the reasons we wanted to do this conference, Carrie, was so that people could understand how could this hidden system of finance, this hidden system of finance grew like the fire under the ground, and then during 2006 to 2012, it just burst up, and it's as though it has overwhelmed the whole, regular system of finance. I used to say 9/11 was how they got the black budget off budget to on budget. And if you look, if you look at how they changed sort of the financial mechanisms and what happened on 9/11, that was part of it.
So the bottom line is, they took your software, and this is one of the ways in which they were able to shut you down, would you say?
Right. But it was also, the most important thing was it made it feasible to dramatically increase the amount of mortgage fraud, because they implemented the MERS system. I don't know if you're aware of what MERS is.
No.
But by implementing the MERS system and shutting down Community Wizard, it meant they could issue many more mortgages than there were homes. So let me give you an example. In 1994, my company was the lead financial advisor for the Federal Housing Administration. And I had seen the FHA internal plans on increasing the number of mortgage originations they were going to do in poor neighborhoods. And several months later, the same office came out with an announcement where they had reached an agreement with Freddie and Fannie about how many mortgages they were going to originate in the same neighborhood. And I looked at the numbers, Carrie, and I realized that's more homes. They were planning on originating more mortgages between Freddie, Fannie, and FHA than there were homes. And I said to a very high-level official, I said, wait a minute, there's something very wrong here. You're talking about, people are going to have to refinance their mortgages twice from prison, a year to make these numbers. And she turned to me and she said, shut up, this is none of your business.
Really?
Right. Now this is 1994, 95, that time frame, because if you look at the housing bubble, it took thousands of changes in laws and regulations at the Federal Housing Administration, at HUD, at the Department of Treasury, at the Department of Justice, at Freddie, at Fannie. The nuts and bolts of engineering the housing bubble took a lot of work. Oh. Okay, so this was coming from the highest levels of the financial system, and I mean government. So this was a bubble engineered intentionally by government, and they knew. They knew it was going to be fraudulent. They could not,
Okay, but what's interesting about that is that, so we have at a certain level of government knowledge But the question is, did they know why they were doing what they were doing? In other words, probably maybe they knew payoffs were going certain places and they were supposed to allocate those payoffs. But did they really know the depth to which, or do they even know today, of what they're really a part of?
I think, what different people know is, the knowledge is very dispersed. I think what a lot of people thought is we're going to pull as much capital as we can from the developed world and shift it and invest it in the emerging markets.
Really?
So I think, well, the WTO had just been passed. The Uruguay round of GATT had just been passed. And, if I was going to tell you to watch one video to understand the economy today, besides what's going on covertly, watch Sir James Goldsmith in 1994 come to the United States and go on Charlie Rose and basically say, this is financial insanity. We're going to destroy our society by doing this kind of, by globalizing labor and competing labor in countries where people make $1 a day against the developed world. You're going to basically bankrupt you're going to destroy the middle class in the developed world. So this was all understood and known. And so this was part of what's called the rebalancing of the global economy. And I think a lot of people thought we're pulling money out and we're shifting it to Asia, we're shifting it to abroad. And I think the understanding of the extent of the fraud or of the general model, a lot of people were on a need-to-know basis and didn't see the big picture.
Well, along those lines, did you ever talk to Karen Hudis about what was going on with the IMF?
No, when somebody first asked me to watch her descriptions when she first started to talk, and frankly, I did not find her information either compelling or useful, and just said, I'm not gonna.
Really?
So yeah, so I just and now I was looking at her stuff at the World Bank, but for anybody to be at the World Bank that long and not notice and if you look at what she was talking about whistleblowing, it was sort of minor stuff, a lot of which I considered irrelevant. So I just.
But it does have to do with, a system. I mean, have you read The Economic Hitman and all of that?
Yeah, and I wrote an article. I was very uncomfortable with that material, and I think it was very useful because, Greg Palast and Ann Williamson had done extraordinary reporting on the kind of financial transactions and fraud that the Economic Hitman book described. But the juice in that book was he was saying, I was doing it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So that, for a lot of people, that made it more juicy. But if you look at that first book, he very much stops short and says, oh, well, this is sort of a giant accident. People really didn't know what was going on. Which is complete yah-yah. This was being run top down.
Yes.
The people in charge know exactly what they're doing. It's, so
right.
It was kind of like a modified hangout, and I found it very offensive. Particularly because you had reporters doing great reporting that wasn't modified hangout.
Okay.
Now, what I discovered was, because he'd been doing it personally, I think it was very useful to a lot of people to say, okay, well,
right.
They relate to the intimate story of somebody doing the fraud.
Well, yeah, and there was sort of this, sort of spy, in the fold kind of thing going on with it. Okay, so but you understood that was going on. Did you understand it back in the days when you were, in the housing office?
Something, I never believed that the fraud could be anywhere as bad as it was without me knowing about it. And you also had a certain sense of we're struggling to choose between options that are all bad options. So I certainly had a sense of the covert economy. It's very interesting. The Bushies, the first Bush administration, there was great effort to kind of keep the covert and the overt separate, separate worlds, and a lot of attention was being paid to kind of making it look, the appearance, and and you had to be careful. And it was funny because the Clintons had lived in a small state, which was much more intimate, and it was during the Clinton period, and I think part of it was people were just getting more and more tired with the pretense. You kind of blew through a lot of the financial controls, and every administration seemed to get more and more kind of out of control. And I think part of it was you literally had this hidden financial system kind of overwhelm and overtake the overt system at some point. So, you know, it was a tendency.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of rode that wave in a sense.
Yeah, and I kind of believe, I wasn't that interested in the fraud. I was like, how can we use the new technology to build enough of a learning metabolism economically and realign things? So here's the problem. The problem with what's happening in the economy is you're destroying wealth. You're centralizing wealth, so you're building these huge pools of capital, but you're destroying wealth. So what I was interested in is how do we realign so we can create so much more wealth that we can have enough wealth to do extraordinary space program, travel the galaxy, all these different things, but have, you know, a healthy life here on Earth. Mm-hmm. So what I was looking is where's the jump the curve opportunity to really realign and create wealth. And I couldn't understand why, you know, why is genocide so attractive? I'll never forget, I found a guy who'd been doing the financial fraud for the Office of Naval Intelligence at one point. And I said to him, you know, I said, Harry, you're so clever. I could teach you how to make more money honestly. And he looked at me like I had just punched him in the stomach. And he said, I would never make money honestly. I mean, it's like real men do fraud. And I thought, you know, what is it was kind of like, it's not, it's sissies do honest investment. That's sissy stuff.
It's kind of like a mafia don attitude. Yeah,
right, right.
You know, mano, we do this.
Right.
But no, okay, so, but you have also come out recently talking about, you know, the link to Black projects much more overtly than you used to. And you're also linking it to UFOs. And one of the statements, I watched a video in which you're talking about
right.
the amount of technology in the skies, you know, has to come from somewhere. And it's basically, how can it be produced on Earth? All that, you know, hardware, as you called it.
Right.
And I thought that was a great kind of no-brainer kind of statement, but that people had been overlooking, people that want to be in denial about all of this.
Well, I'm a person who prices everything out.
Okay.
So, if you show me a documentary and with lots of different video shots of UFOs, my mind is automatically thinking, okay, how much did it take to build that? How much does it take to run that? What kind of crew does it need? I'm doing the budget for that thing.
Yes.
And one of the things I've always, a lot of the reason I stayed away from this topic was I knew nothing about it. And intermittently I would go in and try and read, and I'd just tear my hair out. I can't make any sense of it. I just can't figure it out. And I had no personal experience, so it's kind of a blank, and it took many years, but then I found Richard Dolan's book, and then I found Joseph Farrell's book.
Right.
And Joseph and Richard were two of the people, as well as some of the Project Hamlets, like the interview we were talking about. So I found a series of people who I started to feel were very grounded, the research was very solid, and they could make enough sense out of it to me so that I, as a financial person, I could relate. And so I started to kind of collaborate with them. And I don't try and learn that area, but what I do is I try and help them understand the financial stuff, and then we because I'm this side of the balance sheet, they're that side of the balance sheet, and I'm saying, this fits here, and this fit, So it wasn't until I could find enough people and get it enough distilled so that it could, it could snap on like the puzzle pieces.
Right. So you pierced the veil. You started going through and following the money, so to speak. All the way?
Right. Well, here's what happened. I believe that what happened between 92, for many years we've had this hidden system of finance. We've had, we went through a period where literally the hidden system of finance overwhelmed the overt financial system. That's what the bailouts and the financial crisis were. And I really feel now that we've gone through what I call a financial coup d'etat, a change in control.
Right.
And so we're now in a very different world and system than we've ever been before.
As of when?
As of two things. We engineered the bailouts, and then the Federal Reserve continued with quantitative easing. I believe had a shredding party because they're buying up, I think, a huge amount of fraudulent paper and essentially shredding it while it's on their balance sheet. So So I think between the bailouts and quantitative easing, we both cleaned up a lot of the fraud, paid a lot of people and things off. Think of it this way, it's like a leveraged buyout, except instead of buying out a company, you're buying out the planet. Okay, so you issue $40 trillion of fraudulent paper, then you use that to get control of the financial mechanism. Then once you've got control of the financial mechanism, you have the bailouts, and you use that to shred and cover up the paper. And then you wait for the statute of limitations to be over, and then you're out the other side. The coup's over. Okay? And you got your cash when you issued the phony baloney paper.
Right.
Okay? Now it looks like they've probably got more cash. I'm grossly oversimplifying, but essentially...
Okay, what about the idea that some of the money, the bailout money, went to England? You've heard that, right?
Well, here's the big question, where'd the money go? And usually in a situation like this, it's not just one place.
Right.
But I suspect, so let me give you, my number for the financial coup d'etat was about $40 trillion went someplace. Now, I think some of it went into the emerging markets to rebalance the global economy. So you pull capital out of the mature economy and you reinvest it in the high growth economy. So some of it was rebalancing the global economy. But there was enough money left over to basically create a private endowment that could produce dividends and interest sufficient to run a world government without taxpayers. Okay, so you notice we go into a budget sequestration. They're talking about cutting the defense budget, but Lockheed Martin stock keeps going up. Why is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think these guys saw what was coming and they said, look, we can spend this money on nursing homes, or we can take it out now, pull it out of the retirement funds, pull it out of, and create enough of a financial juggernaut that we can continue to run whatever we want to run on a private endowment basis. Okay, so that's another possibility. I think the black budget projects, need, as Joseph was talking about, secret money. So it's not just the money that's getting clawed out from other agencies in the sort of technical black budget, but it's the secret sources of financing.
Yes.
So I think a huge amount of money has gone there. And
well, what about, are you aware of the what they call the trading programs, the high yield,
the high frequency?
Where it's the investment, the minimum investment is something like, I don't know if it's 100,000, 100 million. I don't even know.
I've bumped into them and avoided them. So, but
you have?
Yeah. So I've bumped into them.
Okay. But when you say you've bumped into them and avoided them, why are you saying that? Because a person like you would seem to be. Did you ever read the White Hat reports, for example?
No.
There's a group of, it's called Dr. Blogspot, and they were writing reports about. They started to get into where the black money went, where the black project money came from, and one of the big things is supposed to be the trading programs. And so I wonder,
here's the problem. When you go down, when you get into that all that stuff, you run into a world which is there's so many different ways to get burnt. And there's so much fraud going on. It's almost as though, I'm a person who enjoys an enormous amount of protection. I don't want to go down that world because I lose my protection.
Really?
Yeah. So this is spiritual.
But that's amazing. Okay, well, what about the Golden Lily? I don't know if you heard the whole thing.
Right, I know this story.
Because when he starts going to Golden Lily, this is actually trading program money sort of is wrapped in there. The Indonesian government trying to bring these bonds, the whole Neil Keenan thing. I don't know if you follow.
Here's what I've tried to do. I'm a great believer that, I'm interested in building an economy that builds real wealth. And a lot of the trading programs are basically ways of skimming from the system through a debasement process. And it's a whole kind of draining wealth that I just don't want to be involved in. It's just whether it's spiritually or financially.
But it's going on.
I
would you say
suspect it's
that?
going on. I don't know of a way to get reliable information. I know of a way to get tons of information, but I don't know of a way to get any reliable information on it.
Okay, so in terms of your situation, though, because maybe you're entering a land that you don't even, you don't know the boundaries of that land. You may sense them when you feel you're in more dangerous
Right.
territory than others, but like you say, you don't know the lay of the land, you don't know the end, you don't know the perimeter, you don't know when
Right.
you're on the edge of that
Right.
land. Because it is, I mean, let's face it, most of us topsiders, so to speak, don't know that, okay?
Right.
All right?
Right.
So, but you've skirted onto the edges every once in a while. That was like when John, from the Arlington Institute, offered you the luncheon where
Right.
you might, meet some people, right?
Right.
That was one of those opportunities to go to the edge, right?
Maybe. I mean, we don't. I don't.
You
To
didn't
this
know
day,
that
I
was
don't know.
you think maybe that was a way to take you offline, to
I-
lie to you,
here's
to
the thing,
make you a
I don't-
woo-woo person. And
I
then-
don't know if that was legitimate. I have no idea.
You
what
don't
that
know
was.
if that was a legitimate offer.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know if that
Okay.
was a legitimate offer.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But at this moment, because you're putting two and two together, you would acknowledge that, look, there are craft up there, right? And they come from somewhere.
Right.
Maybe our underground bases, there's no
Right.
such thing as ET, let's say, in that land. And you can see there's a budget.
Here's what I'm saying.
Okay,
I have subscribers and I have clients.
yes,
This is relevant to their financial life.
yes,
In other words, their financial life is in jeopardy and at risk because of this.
yes.
And I want to make sure that as safe as they can be and as well as they can navigate, that they have the information and knowledge they need to navigate. But they need to know that this stuff is going on and could impact, their choices in life, whether it's health, whether it's where they go to school, what they do with their time, what jobs they get. Before they decide they want to go work for a defense contractor, they better know they could go down this rabbit hole. So I want them to have an understanding of opportunities and risks. So to me, I have, this is an ethical issue. It is a material omission for me to pretend that this stuff is not happening. Now, I don't begin to understand it, but I do know that we know enough. If you read Richard or Joseph's latest books, we have very credible, serious intellectuals who've done the research, who've aggregated the information. They can read it, they can connect it to their day-to-day life, and they can start to make wiser choices.
Right.
When I spend a lot of time with people helping them clean themselves up from financial fraud or health fraud or other things that have really hurt them financially or physically because they didn't know.
Yes.
If they knew, they could have navigated more successfully. They could have known, oh, stay away from the,
Mm-hmm.
So I want to make sure that the people I'm responsible for have better maps, because I want to make sure that they choose what they want. They have the map they need to achieve their purpose in life, instead of continually, it's like bumper cars out there. They're getting into bumper cars and smashing into each other and making all sorts of choices that waste their time, waste their money, put them in debt because they didn't know.
Right. Well, I mean, even this housing thing linked up with the drugs, linked up with the secret government that's using those drugs to funnel into the black projects, et cetera.
Right.
They're not going to allow someone like you to set up a database that tracks all of that on surface, right? And that's in essence your link. So you didn't know you had a link, but now you have a link.
Right.
A through line, so to speak. And by the same token, they don't know that the aerospace industry is not going downhill. No matter what they say about money not being available, that these contracts are going to be there forever.
Here's the last time, I sort of got into this. For many years, I've been part of different financial groups who say the economy is going to collapse, and I say, no, it's not. It's going to slow burn. And this goes on and on and on. And I have many of who are friends and we're close, and they say, we get on the radio and they say, the economy is the financial system going to collapse. I said, no, it's not. It's going to slow burn. And the reason, the difference between us is because I understand how they use the information technology. I understand the black projects. I understand, it's this whole understanding that is behind this, me saying the slow burn. So finally we got into last year, and you had just shrieking from these whole groups, the economy's going to collapse. I said, no, it's not going to collapse. It's not going to collapse at all. Are you kidding? These guys have just stolen $40 trillion. They're sitting pretty. And if you go to the areas of the country where they're reinvesting, the economy's booming.
Like here, hello.
So I said, I finally said, I've got to find a way, because I was getting really concerned, Carrie. I would have people come to me who'd made terrible financial choices because they believe these guys, and they're absolutely, the end of the world is coming, it's going to collapse. I was like, no. So I said, we do an annual wrap-up every year on the Celerity Report. So for the annual wrap-up, I spent a lot of time with Joseph. I would stop and talk with him, and we kind of figured it out. We got this picture of, okay, here's they've shifted the money out, and here's what's growing, and this is growing, and this is dying, and there's a transition going on. And we called it the breakaway.
Yeah.
And so I did a big wrap-up where I described the breakaway, and from a point of view of, okay, here are the parts of the economy that are growing, and here are the parts that are going to be, and a lot of it organizes around the smartphones, believe it or not. Smartphones are a very, very important thing to understand what's going on. And it was amazing, because I then went out to a conference after I prepared a lot of the information, and I walked into this room, and you had 400 presentations from people about the global financial system. So on its last legs, it's going to collapse. And then I get up there and say, I don't think so. And I start off in the first part of the presentation, I mentioned the black budget. And I wish you'd been there, because at the end, the first question, a woman stood up, she said, I'm one of your subscribers. She said, you're not going to want to hear this, but I don't think anybody in this room has ever heard of the black budget or knows what it is. So could you explain what the black budget? I said, oh, this is really scary. Because and so you have all of these people sitting around making financial choices without the kind of map they need to make wise financial choices.
Yeah.
So this is bigger, because once the financial coup was over, the train left the station. The breakaway civilization is proceeding.
Absolutely.
They are proceeding at lightning speed.
Yeah.
And we're all sitting around, and what we don't understand is, no, we are being collapsed, but the economy is not being collapsed.
Yeah,
So
that their deal is actually, running on steroids at the moment.
it's stronger than it's ever been.
Yeah.
It's unbelievably strong.
Yeah. Okay, well, and that's, that's just awesome that you get that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But what I would say, I would expand one part, and I would say that you're saying financial, understanding the financial system is one thing, but also understanding the political, in other words, system. See, you can't make a choice about where to live,
Right.
where to, what part of the globe to live, what government to live under, anything, if you don't understand that there's this whole world going on in which, yes, the money's all funneling, but also all the talent, they're draining the talent pools.
Right.
The children are being recruited into.
Right.
So it's every layer of our lives.
Right.
It's not just one, one.
There's
layer.
been a change of control.
Yeah.
There's been a change of control, and it's very significant, and you need to understand that this is happening, and
it changes everything about, as you were saying, what choice do you make about a career? Where do you invest your money, as you were saying, and the retirement? Now, I don't even know. See, this is interesting, and I don't know. I don't know anything about this area. I don't know anything about insurance either, and that's obviously a huge rabbit hole in itself. But how can you have a retirement when the economy isn't built for that? You know what I mean? It's not. It doesn't care about that anymore. Right. It's really not about saving people and keeping them alive for X number of years, other than through pharmaceuticals and using them as guinea pigs.
Well, I forget the exact. I think a woman my age or older who does not have who does not have a high school education, since 1991, I think their average life expectancy has dropped 6 years. So one of the ways they're going to balance the budget and the Social Security is life expectancy is coming down. And to me, one of the most important things we can do if we understand what's going on financially in the retirement system and in the social safety net is really take charge of our own health.
Yeah.
Really take charge of your own health.
Absolutely.
Because if you really understand that you cannot trust the system and that you have to be your own doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to take the time to really invest proactively in being healthy,
Yes.
it can make an enormous difference.
Yes.
Another one that I really care about is I've worked with some wonderful young people on, okay, here's your budget, here's how much money you have to get a college and graduate education. What's your learning plan? What do you want to learn, and how do you get that in very granular ways and make it economic? And what they discover is, rather than just go through an automatic route, they just say, okay, I need this, I go here for this thing and this thing and this thing, but I need a fancy degree, I'll get that here. And suddenly they're navigating the system as a very smart consumer, knowing, I don't take out any student loans, and I do it here, that, I can't trust the system, they're all gonna lie, they're gonna trick me.
Yes.
And there's 5,000 courses, I can spend 20 years in the university, and all I'm gonna get is disinformation.
Right.
One of my favorite subscribers wrote to me, and she said, I'm in college, and she said, I have to take history classes, I'm required. And she said, but it's really great, I have all of your stuff on my iPod, and when they start to lie, I just put in my earplugs, and then you tell me the truth, and I just sit there and
Yeah, scary stuff. But it's great. It's great to have someone like you who's out there sort of having really had their hand on the pulse of what's going on this very, very practical level, of everyday life in terms of, who would think there was this incredible link between mortgages and housing
Right.
on, certainly in the United States, but I think this is worldwide. We're talking real estate,
Right.
Bottom line, and then that all relates to the drug trade and
Right.
where that blossoms, and then to also black
Right.
projects and,
Right.
and so on.
Right.
And it must also have to do with, I don't know what you call, but endowments and where they give money, like
Yes.
certain areas of the country getting stuff,
Right.
and the other areas not.
The hardest thing for most Americans is they know something's wrong,
Yes.
and they have to spend an enormous amount of time pretending that this official reality is true when they know it's not.
Yeah.
But for them, they don't want to go there. They're just like, please let me get through the day. So they need a way of navigating this, which is energizing for them and doesn't waste their time and money. And so the question is, how can we help them see what's going on in a way which is easy? That's why I always use movies, because one of the things I learned is, a lot of this stuff is scary or depressing. So how could I use movies, because they're just too tired at the end of the day to look at some of this stuff.
Right.
How could I use movies to make it interesting? That's why you doing videos, the more we do videos, I think, the easier it is for them.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is kind of help them escape the Orwellian, they need to be effective within the system because they got to pay their rent. So they're going into the system to get the money to pay their rent, and that's how it has to be. But how can they navigate it in a way where they can get along and not seem strange to anybody, so they can navigate it successfully, but they know enough so they don't get tricked?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that becomes the name of the game also, because they're gonna, these people are being deceived right, left, and center,
Right.
and that whether it's a health product they buy or some kind of treatment they go for that's just going to kill them anyway, and so on. Okay, well, I've kept you for quite a bit of time here, and I don't.
This was our 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I want to, just wrap this up in sort of a good way. In terms of your own livelihood, I can see where you're kind of, you had to go through a time when they took you down, you dealt with it, you fought back, and you seem
Right.
to have been very successful in sort of regaining your footing, so to speak.
I think, I'm nowhere near where I want to get to.
Okay.
So I want to get to the point where my businesses are thriving and I'm enjoying what I do. The first 5 years is, when you're an entrepreneur, you start something, it's
Yes.
tough. But it's beginning to finally click in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very optimistic about where it's going. And I like my life. I used to work with people I didn't admire or respect. Not when I was on Wall Street, I worked with people I very much liked and very much respected. In the Bush administration, I had to work with a lot of people I didn't like and I didn't respect. And also, when I was doing Hamilton Securities Group, I was in Washington. Now I work with people I love. And I work for people I love. And I work for people I admire and respect a great deal. And day to day, I deal with great people. So, I like to think that the quality of people that I do business with has improved enormously. I'm in that young period of building, but that's what I like about it. I like the day-to-day. I deal with very enlightened, very nice people.
Okay, now it seems to me, I'm just going to give you a sort of a challenge here. It seems to me that you're dealing with people like to allow them to sort of adjust to the system, okay, but not to bucket necessarily. Maybe bucket sort of in a very covert way such that they can still maintain a facade so that they don't get targeted.
So here's the thing, I end this Larry report every week where I say, don't worry about if there's a conspiracy. If you're not in one, you need to start one. Because I grew up in a world where conspiracies were how we organized everything.
All right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And conspiracies weren't necessarily illegal, but it was just you get together with a group of people, you come up with a plan, and you do it. So that was the organizing principle of the universe. I was like, what's wrong with this? This is great. This is how you do things.
Yeah.
So what I want to see, what I believe is that we have the power to change this entirely. Okay? Now, part of it is to change something, you need to understand it. And the reality is I've spent my whole life trying to understand who's running things and why they're behaving this way. And to this day, Carrie, I don't know that. I can't sit down and tell you.
Sure.
I can engage in conjecture, but I don't know. Right. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this conference, is to try and improve our, to lessen how much we don't know. But I still don't know. But I do know that the human race has the power. Our freedom comes to us by divine authority. And we have the power to choose freedom. Now, I went through that process where I said, okay, I'm going to choose freedom. They're going to kill. I was sure I had no chance to live, and I made it. But it was a miracle. Miracles happen when you make that choice.
Yeah.
So we have to make that choice. Now, tomorrow, I can say this to you because you're a very attractive woman. Tomorrow, if every woman went up and said, every man who's doing anything evil or genocide gets no sex, all of this would stop. Is it true?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. So one of the most powerful books I wrote, I'm giving you my whole speech from tomorrow, was Robert Axelrod's The Evolution of Cooperation, where he says if we bring transparency to who's doing, true evil, they'll be shunned.
Absolutely.
So if the human race woke up and said, I'm not going along with this, I'm not doing it, I'm going to laugh at it. Now, when we do that, we have to have a vision of how we could re-engineer the money so that it can be sustainable. We need to deal with the nuts and bolts of how you make it work. So we need a picture of success where we can get from here to there. But the minute we see that and we start shunning, so what I try and do on the Solari report is show people where they can gather their power. And the more you just say no, you sent me, I wrote a letter. I couldn't believe it. I wrote a letter I had worked at Goldman Sachs for the summer. And if you're a Goldman Sachs alumni, you get an email and you get on there, you get the research. And I wrote them and I said, you guys are scumbags. Delete me from your list. And I wrote, I don't want your research, go jump in a lake. And I then published my letter. And, I think we need to all do that. We need to hold people, I'll sit down at a dinner party and say, Goldman Sachs, I said, well, you're the scumbag that's responsible. I'm amazed you're not worried that somebody will shoot you, and if they do shoot you, I will try and defend them in the court of law saying it was self-defense. So, we need to hold people in our lives accountable. So this is a matter of bringing transparency and taking the action. If everybody in America pulled their money out of all the banks that are doing the fraud, it would shift.
Yeah.
You know, as alternative media, as you, as the Solari Report, as all the people who are here do what they do, it's forcing the mainstream. I was in the Midland, Texas airport. I was there on business, and I don't own a television set, but I was in the deli, in the airport, and the deli was turned on as one of the top financial shows. It was all my stuff. It was whole sentences and paragraphs from, you know, my most recent stuff. They're trying to hold the space, do you know what I mean? And they're having to shift because we're shifting.
They are.
So I believe we have the power to change it, but we need to change it in a way, you know, take my subscriber, that person's being drained. I need to teach them how to change this to reduce the drain. And every time they reduce the drain, they get more energy to do the next thing.
Yes.
So we need to do this in a way, you know, to some people it would seem incremental, but I want them to have successful lives and I want them to thrive. Mm-hmm. And I want them to thrive by pulling away from the thing that's draining them.
Right.
So think of it this way, it's like having a parasite.
Mm-hmm.
If you cut off that which is feeding the parasite and draining you, the parasite gets weaker and you get stronger.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do. So.
Okay. All right, I think that's a good ending. Thank
Okay.
you very
Thank
much
you. Thank
for your
you for
service
everything you
to
do.
humanity.